This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is the show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, we have a great show for you today. I am totally stoked here because this is just a neat story you do not want to miss. I am talking with today Anna Kelly, and she is the founding partner of Zenith Capital Group, Apex Multifamily and REIMom.com. So, wow, she's got a lot of little things going on there. We're going to hear more about that. As a top-ranked former financial relationship manager for a private bank and having worked in the financial sector for 20 years, Anna has a keen understanding of various financial tools available to grow and preserve wealth. Believing real estate to be one of the most powerful tools for creating stable cash flow, asset preservation, and equity growth, the trifecta of investments, Anna began investing in real estate 20 years ago. She has purchased, renovated, sold, and rented millions of dollars in real estate across numerous asset classes while working full-time and raising 4 active children. Anna recently retired from her corporate career after creating financial freedom through real estate investing. She currently owns and manages a portfolio valued over $16 million across 175 doors and is a passive investor in multiple apartment syndications. As a general partner and sponsor, Anna actively seeks out the best multifamily investment opportunities for her partners and investors. She has coached numerous new investors through the purchase of their first rental properties and flip projects and enjoys helping others to overcome their fears, increase their knowledge, and minimize their risk in real estate. Finally, she is an Amazon #1 best-selling author and runs a meetup group for women in real estate, REI Like a Girl. This is great. Well, Anna, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Thank you so much, Bill. It is really my honor to be here with you today.
Oh, man, it's great to have you here. You have a great story. I don't want to talk here. I want to have you talk, but I'd love you just to kind of take us through the beginning. You know, you start off with a very humble beginning, and it's just an amazing story. So, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you just take us through your life and bring us up to date to where you are now?
Sure. As you mentioned, I have very humble beginnings. I grew up the oldest of 6 children with a single mom who was actually a leasing agent in a Section 8 apartment complex in San Antonio, Texas. So I grew up, in Section 8 housing from the time I was 6 till I was about 15 years old. And through that, and just through being a caretaker for my siblings while my mom worked two jobs, during the day and overnight, I really was very, very driven to change my story, if you will, and just to find ways to succeed and get out of that type of environment so that one day, I could have, at the time, Bill, I thought money was the answer. Obviously, I don't think that way anymore, but I thought, if I just do well in school and I'm the best at everything I do, then one day, I'll have a house and I won't have to live in Section 8 housing, and I could take care of myself no matter, what happened in life. And so I was very, very driven, did very, very well in school. I graduated early from high school, early from college while working full time. And then I became a financial relationship manager for Bank of America. And that's where I really started learning about money and investments and what the wealthy did with their money. And so it was the first time I really learned about taking control of my finances, and also the first time I really learned about real estate, Bill, because a lot of my very wealthy clients who we were trying to get to bring money to the bank and buy different investment products with us made more money in real estate than they did other things. And so that kind of piqued my interest about real estate and led me to eventually start down that path to where I now basically have retired thanks to real estate, and went from, truly having nothing and nobody that knew anything about money in my family to help me to where, by the grace of God, I've been able to, retire this last May at age 44, be home with my children, and am, financially independent at this point.
How exciting. Oh, what a neat story. Wow. Well, real estate, you were obviously you're doing something very different in terms of the sort of the financial. Yeah, it was sort of like a financial planning and investments, working with stocks and bonds and so forth.
Yes. So basically, we worked with the wealthiest clients in our bank and taught them and told them about all the different financial products we had to offer, anything from annuities to life insurance products, mortgages, stocks, bonds, mutual funds.
Gotcha. Now, going from that, were you also an investor at that time as well in a lot of the products that you would recommend to your clients?
Oh, no. I had no idea, Bill, looking back, why this company hired me. I was 23 or 24 years old, had been out of college for about a year and knew somebody that said, I think she would be a great addition to our team. She's smart, she understands numbers. And they basically hired me for a master's degree required position with no experience and no training, and they trained me. And so I had literally no money. I made good money for someone of that age in my job, but I was nowhere near ready to start investing.
Wow. Well, so you definitely had to learn a lot about finance and good investing. What was sort of your first foray into real estate?
Sure. So my very first real estate investment was really, minor in the grand scheme of things. But I realized that as somebody who was making pretty good money for my age and, had a car payment and thought, I could just continue to spend money and make money. And I realized I lived in a very, very expensive apartment and that it would be much smarter for me to buy a condo rather than throw my money away on an apartment. And that one day I could just keep that condo if I ever bought a house and rent that out. So I bought a condo that I house hacked. And then the next property, once I got married, I bought a house in a regentrifying up and coming area. In hopes that it would go up in value and that we would make a bunch of money on it. And then after that, a couple years later, I did my first flip.
Wow. So the condo, you obviously got a roommate in there. You say you house hacked it. Did you rent out, was it multiple rooms or 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom?
No, it was just a 1-bedroom condo and I just lived in it. And, basically had a mortgage I was paying down. So it was more of an investment than just renting an apartment of comparable quality.
Gotcha. Okay. And then moving into a home, that must have been exciting. But you also became a landlord at the same time, right? Because you held on to that condo.
Well, the really dumb thing that I did, Bill, was I sold it. So after I bought it in order to, maybe keep it as a rental, my husband and I got married and he had a lot of school debt. He was a chiropractor and we had a six-figure school debt. And we said, we really need to pay down this loan. And I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So I just thought, hey, I can sell this thing and make, $30,000 on it. Let's just sell it and put that chunk on the school loan. So I sold it. And really wasn't thinking about rental property at that point beyond that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, probably you avoided some HOA fees and other things that might not have been too much fun either as a rental. So,
Right.
probably worked out best, right? So, okay. So you got your own home now. Okay. And you're still working at the bank, right? So that sounds like that was that you stayed there pretty much through your real estate investing, at least getting started, right?
Actually, I was at Bank of America, and Bank of America got bought by Nations Bank, and they came in and laid off all of Bank of America's private bankers and brought in their own. And so I left to go to work for AIG Life Insurance Company a couple years later. And so I actually was at AIG for 20 years working in product development and a department that worked with ultra high net worth individuals and banks and created life insurance for those individuals where they could basically bring their own selected hedge fund investment to invest in within our policies tax-free for life.
Gotcha. Okay. So as a life insurance broker, then during that time period is where you sort of said, okay, I'm going to consciously look at rental property, or did you look at other types of real estate investments?
Sure. So what happened, Bill, was, as driven as I was to move up the corporate ladder and thinking about money and how I could make money, I really didn't seriously think about rental properties and investing in real estate outside of a home until I had my first baby. So in 2003, I had my first child. And, when I held that baby in my arms, he was premature and he was in the NICU. And the thought of having to put him in daycare just absolutely broke my heart. And my husband, as I mentioned, was a new chiropractor, so he didn't make very much money. He was kind of in a associate doctor role, marketing for other doctors. And we had a six-figure school loan, not unlike many people today. And so I knew that, I made significantly more than he did at that time. And I had to keep working in order to pay for our house and our car payments and all the things you think you need to follow the American dream that we really should have held off on. And it kept me from being able to be home with my child. And so during the time I was pregnant with him and maternity leave, I watched a whole lot of the very first shows about flipping houses. And I thought, oh, honey, I have the solution. If I just flip 2 or 3 houses a year, we're going to make so much money. I can quit my job and I can be home with my baby. And so with a 6-month-old in tow, we bought our very first flip property that also had a little bungalow in the back where we had a tenant living there and kind of helping pay the mortgage while we were flipping this property. And we made every single mistake that you can possibly imagine in that house flip. And ultimately, after a year of holding it, because of all the different mistakes we made, we ended up losing about $10,000 on that deal. And my husband lost his job during that time. So we had a school loan, 2 mortgages, 2 car payments, a brand new baby, and 1 job. And he said, we can't afford to do this again. So it took us another 3 years to, kind of realize that real estate could still work. And so we moved to Pennsylvania from Texas. We paid off all of his 6-figure school loan in the first few years we were married. Even through that horror story of a failed flip. And we moved to PA to start his business. And when we did that, we realized that, number one, it wasn't smart to start a business with hundreds of $1,000s in debt and to buy another house. And that my job was only going to let me work from home on a trial basis. And so we kind of took a step back and we bought a building for him to practice in that had tenants above it and behind it. And we bought a 4-unit apartment building to live in 1 unit, have the other 3 tenants basically paying our taxes, our mortgage, our insurance, so that if it took several years for his business to build up to the point that I could stay home at least our major living expenses and his practice space would be covered by rental property. So that was in 2007. And that's when we really got started into thinking about rentals as really a smart financial move, and then eventually as the way to long-term wealth and income.
Now, was the apartment and the office building related, or you just happened to buy them at the same time? I mean, they weren't part of the same property, were they?
They were not. We actually bought his practice that had the office space with the tenants. And in that year, Bill, we actually moved in with his parents with two little kids, a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, while we spent a year building up his business, seeing if my company was going to let me continue to work from home. And then a year in, when they said, okay, you can keep your job working home, and his business did okay, that's when we bought the 4-unit to move into.
Gotcha. Wow. Man, so you were really, I mean, going gangbusters there, because that was definitely a huge move. But it sounds like a very smart move, because you already had tenants in place when you bought his practice, and then moving into it sounds like a fourplex, right?
Yes.
To get started is very smart, because you obviously have that option of being able to move out and continue with your rentals and to grow that from there. So what happened next? How long were you in the fourplex before you looked at moving out?
So, you make your great plans and you think you have everything figured out. And then things like 2008, 2009 financial collapse happen. And
Oof.
That's exactly what happened to us, Bill. So, working for AIG, my husband had been in business about a year, and he made okay money, but we had, huge debt. We started his business with about $300,000 in business startup debt, as well as the cost of the building that was another $400,000. And we had to have my job to sustain us. And so, I had my kids home, and my mother-in-law was helping with the kids while I worked during the day. But I thought that I'd be able to, quit working within a year and be able to, just downsize and live on less, but be able to be home with my children. And when the market collapsed, AIG, as you know, almost went under. And there was a huge, I think it was $2 trillion loan from the federal government to keep AIG afloat, because they were on the hook for so many mortgage loans, and also for a type of insurance that insures the credit of some of these companies that collapsed. And so not only did the economy change, but I lost 2/3 to 3/4 of my 401k almost overnight, and was told that we were most likely going to all lose our jobs. And so it was one of those things where I thought, what in the world are we going to do? Our only livelihood is about to be out the window. And I knew we couldn't afford to move and buy a house at that point. So I pulled what left I had from my 401k. I borrowed it to buy another 4-unit building, because I said, at least if I lose my job, if we buy another 4-unit building, we can have another $1,000, $1,200 a month to cover our groceries and our gas, and that we would be okay until I found another job. And it took several years to bounce back from that, not only because of my job with AIG, but banks tightened up. They wouldn't lend money to me to buy anything else, because we had literally hundreds of thousands in debt, and a company employing me that they knew was on the verge of bankruptcy. So things were much harder than we thought they were going to be, and took us a lot longer to finally bounce back and be able to continue to buy real estate and eventually our own house.
Well, it sounds like, one thing that sounds like it probably worked out well, and you can clarify this if that's the case or not, but buying that second fourplex, especially when the market was as down as it was, I would imagine it ended up being a good decision for the long haul, I would imagine,
Yes.
as prices started to come back up.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And so, okay, now you've got his practice survived that time during that sort of difficult recession. A lot of people I know cut back on a lot of their expenses, including medical care and that kind of thing.
It survived, but barely, Bill, because as you mentioned, especially with being a chiropractor, people come because they're in pain. And when they used to be able to pay $10 or $20 for a copay, 3 times a week for a couple of weeks until everything got back to normal, most people went to companies where their insurance started to have huge deductibles instead of copays. And so patients went from, $60 a week for a couple of weeks to, $60 a visit, several $100s a month. And they just chose to pop pills instead of coming in. And so people were having to cut back, and it really made his business suffer. And, many, many other general practitioners, doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors went under during that time. And the only thing that really sustained us was the real estate while we were trying to stay afloat with the chiropractic business.
Wow. And you bought the second duplex, what year roughly?
I bought that in 2009, right after the crash started. And literally the day that I was supposed to settle on it the first time, a bigwig at Wells Fargo called the loan and refused to fund it because he saw I worked for AIG. So I was shocked. I had never had anything like that happen to me at the settlement table, and we had to find another small regional bank that would fund it and do the deal. So I got it done just in time. And then it took me another 5 years before banks would lend to us because of who I worked for and the state of my husband's business at that time.
Man, oh man. Wow.
It was hard.
Oh, wow. And so your next real estate purchase, did it happen 5 years later?
Yes. So during that time, we kept going back to the banks and saying, we've got these units, we've raised the values, we'd like to use the equity to buy more. And when they looked at our tax returns and saw, we were doing well with those buildings, but I still worked for AIG and his business wasn't doing great, the banks just continued to tell me no. And for 4 or 5 years, we just knew eventually we could raise the value of these things enough and find a bank to refinance us. So we took that time to really focus on keeping his business afloat and to pouring money back into those buildings where we would update all the units one at a time, raise the rents, cut the expenses, and raise the value. And eventually I went back to a bank and said, can I borrow from one of them from the equity to buy another building? And they said, okay. And then I went to a real estate meetup group, which I hadn't been to one in 5 years, and went to a meetup group, and a seller stood up and said he was interested in selling a small multi-unit in my area. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to ask if he'll take seller financing. Because I had read all about it, Bill, but I had never really tried to do it, thinking nobody's going to sell me their building without a bank. And to my surprise, he said yes. And
wow.
When I had a seller willing to finance me without going through a bank, and I learned how he could defer his capital gains by offering me seller financing, I basically laid those things out on the table for him, and we came up with a win-win. And so when I had a little bit of a line of credit to buy another building and I had my next property that he said yes to, it gave me the confidence that I could continue to buy property even without a bank. I would just have to do it slow and steady until I became, stable enough financially that I would be bankable to grow, larger and more assets. And I just continued down that path. So I found another retiring landlord who was willing to sell to me on owner financing with a balloon payment 5 years later. And then I found a partner to buy another 4-unit with, and then I got this line of credit. So it just began to really grow from there 5 years ago. And I set a 5-year plan to, methodically, slowly continue to buy 4-unit apartment buildings primarily until I could replace my 6-figure income and leave AIG and finally be home with my kiddos.
Wow. So it's just looking at those fourplexes, when did you sort of get to that point where you realized, this is it. I can now make that transition?
A year ago, a little over a year ago, I met my goal of 60 units, which brought in about $150,000 a year at that point. And so I knew with those 60 units, I would be able to retire as soon as I paid down the debt that I used to rehab those units. And so, it was 4 years into my plan, and I said, now I need to basically pay down this debt, save 6 months of expenses for all my buildings and a year's salary in order to safely and conservatively retire, knowing that we were probably heading towards some type of recession in the near future. And so a year ago is when I kind of said, okay, I've got enough now to sustain us. I've got to step it up and come up with a plan to go bigger and to buy bigger apartment buildings that I had always wanted to do. I just didn't have the cash to do it. And I went on the hunt for my first larger multifamily property and knew that if I could just get one, I could pay down the rest of the debt and get to the point of retirement. And so that's what I started to pursue. And after buying a couple more apartment buildings since last December, I was able to finally retire in May.
Wow. How large a units did you go to from that, from the fourplexes?
Sure. So the very first larger multifamily that I bought was a 73-unit apartment building with 44 storage units. And I found that deal and just knew that if I found the deal, I could find a way to fund it. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I knew that there were people out there that, wanted to invest in real estate, and that real estate was a really good investment and that I could produce returns for them better than what, I thought they could get in the stock market. And so I found the deal, I negotiated the deal, got it under contract, much to my surprise, because it was going to be listed the next week with the broker, and it probably would have gone top dollar. And I brought in a partner who went to another investor and said, would you be interested in buying this with us? And the three of us joint ventured and bought that apartment building together.
There was no seller financing on that?
There was not. We went Freddie Mac traditional agency financing.
And did your partners, did you guys jointly sign on the, on the loan docs, or did you have like sort of a sponsor out of your joint venture partners?
No, all three of us signed on the loan docs. All three of us were managing members, and we all participated in, everything from the debt to the management.
That's great. And it was a value add type of deal?
It was the exact kind of property that everybody's looking for, Bill. It was in a very nice Class A to B plus area, 1985 vintage. But in the last 3 years, they had replaced the roofs and the siding, the patios, the driveway. Everything was in excellent condition on the exteriors. But the owners had owned the building, since they built them in the 80s. And they just kept the rents really, really low for their tenants because they didn't have a mortgage and they could. And so that created a value play for us to really go in and do very minor interior improvements and be able to raise the rents a couple $100 a month, by unit, and really be able to force the value of that property.
Now, did you buy it with the idea of selling it in a few years, or were you looking at a long-term hold?
Yeah, the beauty of doing this as a joint venture is that all three of our partners wanted a nice, stable asset that we could hold in our portfolio for the long term. And so we are planning on holding the property for 10 years. And then if we decide that it's still a really strong investment, we may hold it longer.
That's exciting. Wow.
Yes. And the really amazing thing, Bill, is, I needed a certain amount of money to be able to pay down the debt in order to retire. And when you put these larger apartment buildings together, you're able to take an acquisition fee up front for putting the deal together, for finding the deal. And that one acquisition fee allowed me to pay off the rest of the debt that I had. And then I was able to, just work a few more months to save the rest of what I needed. And it really kind of snowballed from there. So since that time, my two partners and I have now bought, we're about to settle on another 96 units. So we've had 3 purchases of 200 units together worth about $20 million in 1 year. It's been incredible.
Wow. Now, are they all in the same area? Are you still in Pennsylvania? Have you moved?
No, I'm still in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, and the properties are all in this area as well.
Oh, such a beautiful part of the country. That's so nice out there. Oh,
it really
wow.
is.
And you've been able to find them all in state, so you didn't have to go out to other states to find these.
That's correct. I have been targeting other states. I'm from Texas, and so I've been looking at Texas. I believe strongly in certain parts of Texas for multifamily. But, as it is the same with single families, where we are in the market cycle, they're really expensive. We're kind of at the high prices, and there's a lot of, in the apartment building space, a lot of institutions chasing that money as well. So the price per door has just kind of skyrocketed and made it difficult to make sense for investors unless you really can find off-market deals. So while I've looked in other states, the ones I was able to actually find off-market, really thanks to the network and the reputation I have here locally, have been here.
Oh man, that's a neat story. Wow.
Yeah.
God. No, that is so exciting. That is just really, really neat. And you've got some other ones I guess you can't talk about, huh? That are coming up.
I can. We actually just closed on 250 units in Atlanta, Georgia, in 2 separate complexes in the suburbs of Atlanta. So I'm now taking on the asset management of those properties as well, and really like the Atlanta market as well.
That's a big change for you. I imagine not having something nearby. I would imagine.
It is, and it's just it's a little bit different management strategy, but in some ways it's less management intensive because the larger complexes you buy, you can afford to go with very strong, experienced property management companies who really take over that property and the operations. They oversee the payroll, the employees on site, all of the day-to-day management. So your role becomes much more high level, making sure that your property management team can execute your business plan than it does, having to be much more involved on the smaller properties.
Yeah, that is a huge advantage when you've got professionals, backing you up and people on site living, or at least working on site that that you can have access to. That's great. That is
absolutely.
Oh, how exciting, man! Oh man. Well, you have. You just have a great story and inspiring to hear, that you started off so humbly and then moved in, and I like the slow and steady. I like when people say that, when people aren't just looking to, just go crazy here. And I like how you methodically, approach this. You looked at paying things down as you went on and, getting yourself out of debt. Whereas a lot of people just leverage themselves and, going into uncertain economic times, it's not such a great idea. And you've been through those times, so know firsthand.
And that's what's made me more conservative. It's really, seeing how we struggled because of debt in the beginning. And then, the economy did crash and we never could have anticipated it. And, we started a business with a lot of debt, which was really a mistake, thinking that, times are going to continue to be well, without really paying attention to all the, national economy and all of the economic indicators that were maybe showing that wasn't the case. So we've just learned to be very, very careful. And we've seen how unforeseen things happen. And so as much as I was desperate to be home with my children much, much earlier, I knew that it wasn't wise to do so. So that was a hard balance, to kind of walk. And of course, I would have loved to have been able to be home with my kids much, much sooner. But now I'm really thankful that even though it took 16 years, we learned a lot of lessons along the way. And those things have made us wiser investors now. And really, very thankful that the experiences that we learned along the way is what's making it possible for us to do things at a much higher level now.
Oh yeah, and I just I think what's just very moving about your story is the fact that you're not unlike a lot of people out there, and we have families, we have kids, we have concerns at home as well as businesses and goals and the fact that you were able to work with AIG so that you could work from home, for example, and you fought for that and were able to accomplish that. Made a huge difference, I'm sure, in the home. So you add that in with the fact that. You've got your husband working very hard to get his practice going, and you're all kind of working together here. It's just it's neat to see that that you did it, and you're doing
Yeah.
it, and wow, you're just like going gangbusters here. It's just really exciting. But I imagine in that course, there were things that, you mentioned yourself, mistakes and things that happened. And I know it's hard sometimes to zero in, but what would you say is sort of the biggest mistake that you really learned from in this process?
I think number one, just trying to do everything on my own, Bill. So, my husband and I, we were so focused on just trying to stay afloat with his business and try to fix up these units. And we knew that if we could just figure out how to buy more real estate, we could get ahead and that could be a real path. But we really didn't have anybody else in our network of family and friends that really were able to challenge us to think outside the box and come up with more creative ways to buy real estate when all the banks said no, for example. So we did everything in a vacuum. The two of us, through this time, we had two more children. So we have four kids, and between, raising kids and working and his business and all the sports and things that are going on, you just get so overwhelmed with life and the amount of time that it takes that it's hard to even sit back and step back and think clearly about how else can we do this? What else can we do? And so I think if we had leveraged other people, gone to some real estate meetings sooner, if we had had podcasts back then and did more, we might have been able to get there more quickly, where we really were just taking it all on ourselves and just doing the best we could to kind of figure it out.
Well, it sounds like you definitely were blessed along the way.
Very.
What would you say was something that you did right that just really rang through that you might want to share with our audience here, as far as maybe your biggest success?
Sure. I think that first JV apartment building that I did in December, it's something that I had always wanted to do, but I really didn't have the confidence to think that I could do it without a lot of cash on my own. And I had been kind of jaded with working with other people through an experience, with a coach that turned out to be a fraud years before, which we didn't really even go into. But I knew that if I really wanted to accelerate this and finally get home with my child before his junior year in high school, that I was going to have to get out of my comfort zone and just go for a bigger building. And so the fact that I was able to get this property, negotiate it with the seller, and figure out how to partner and negotiate a partnership that was a win-win for everybody, to get this thing settled was one of my biggest accomplishments along the way, and really an answer to prayer and a springboard to let me, realize that I could do this at a higher level and finally be able to take that leap of faith and get home with my kiddos.
Wow, that is neat. Now, with your finding partners, that's huge. I mean,
Yes.
and that is like not something to be taken lightly, right? I mean, and did you find folks that that complemented your skills, that maybe brought something new to the party, or how did you know you wanted to partner with these folks?
Sure. So I had spoken at a bunch of local real estate meetup groups just on, getting into buying small apartment buildings and vacation rentals and things like that. And there was a gentleman who I'm now a partner with who also spoke at some of these events and attended. And so we kind of knew of each other. He really did a lot of home flips and was a home builder for many, many years. And so I didn't realize that he was interested in rental property. And we had a conversation one day about wanting to move into buying bigger rentals. And he had his own property management company for the small rentals that his family owned in his town, which was about an hour from me. And so we said, you know what, it might make sense for us to partner on something. If we find a deal that we think would be a good fit for us, let's talk about it. And literally less than 2 weeks later, I had this off-market deal fall in my lap. And I said, okay, Rob has this property management company and a back office that can support and do a lot of the things that I've had to do on my own with my husband for our smaller units. And so this could be a way to kind of free up some of my time to give him a certain role and then me take on a certain role for overseeing the actual on-site property managers. And we said, let's see if we can find a deal and if we would be a good fit. And we just took the leap of faith to say, we're on the same wavelength. We both want the same things. We have complementary skill sets, and we could share in the responsibility. And so we just decided to try it on one building, realizing that, a partnership on a small deal like this doesn't mean you have to be married in business forever. And if you find that it's not a great fit, you just don't do any more deals together. So we just decided to try it, and I'm very thankful that we did.
It's great. And what was that first building? Was that the 70 unit?
It was a 73 unit that had the 44 storage units.
Yeah, I guess after you make the purchase and you start working together is when you really decide, if this is working or not. But obviously
Yes.
it looked like it did because you partnered with them again, right?
It does. And we've actually started a company to start, growing our multifamily business. So we bought the 73 unit together. In May, we bought a 31 unit, and now we're under contract on another 96 units in the area. So it's turned out to be a really great partnership with both him and our other investor partner.
That's great. That is great. Well, our audience are folks that are generally, we have a very broad audience. You have folks, that are just young, just out of school or some in school, and all the way up to our old dog audience, which is really our target, our focus of those 50 years of age and older who are approaching retirement or they're already in retirement.
Sure.
And they're realizing, that financially that there are some challenges here, and they're looking at real estate investing as a means to sort of fill that gap, and kind of in the same way that you were. And now they're, maybe not looking so much at retiring earlier, although there's plenty that listen that are looking at retiring, at a young age. But what advice would you have for that audience? You started not necessarily later in life, but when you really ramped up, maybe it was a little bit later. But what advice would you have for that person that's approaching retirement or in retirement, that in terms of getting started, and what kinds of things they might need to do?
Sure. And, I'll be 45 next month, and my husband will be 50 this month. So we're, closing in on that age as well.
Oh, you guys are young pups, young pups.
Some days I feel that way, and some days I don't. But, I think there's two things. One, as I always tell people, to look at your time and your money availability. And usually people have more time than they do money, or more money than they do time. And so the answer and how best to get started really depends on, your availability of time and money and your skill set, and then your network and whose time, money, and skill set you can leverage if you don't have that on your own. And so I think if you want to get involved in active real estate investing, you really look and say, do I have the time and the skills to start getting into rental properties? And if you don't, but you've got some cash, maybe you look to partner with someone else who does have that skill set, or you buy a turnkey rental where the property management is already in place, the units have already been updated, and you just start benefiting from that cash flow in rental property. The other thing that I think is real important, and that a lot of people don't realize, is that if you have retirement funds, you can often roll those plans into a self-directed IRA or a self-directed 401k, and use those retirement plans to be able to invest in real estate as an alternative to investing in stocks, where you really can, start creating, growth in your retirement plans that you can eventually start cashing out of, through your retirement years, and creating cash that way. And if you don't have retirement funds, or you've got a lot of cash sitting aside, you can invest in some of these apartment syndications, take a huge tax benefit because of the bonus depreciation available to you, and start, creating an income stream for yourself without really having to do the work, because you're basically relying on the apartment operator to do the work and just provide that return to you every month.
That's great advice. Great advice. And it's very impressive when you look at your background too, how you sort of started off house hacking. And really, that first purchase wasn't, just another single family home. It was a fourplex, and moving
Right.
into that, and then leveraging that, and getting another fourplex, and then using that to what eventually worked up to 60 units, mostly fourplexes. And that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And, it was one of those things where my husband had to learn to be hands-on and to fix things. And I had to learn how to handle, the finances and the leases and the tenants. And because we didn't have any money to start with, we had to do all of that on our own. But sometimes people that are already, in their 50s and plus, they've got a little extra cash. You can do the same thing and start purchasing your own, small 4-unit apartment buildings. You just hire out the property management and the maintenance. And maybe you buy a property that's a little more turnkey, that needs a little less work than what we did when we were younger and, could put in that sweat equity. So there's so many ways to do it that don't mean you have to give up a ton of time if you've got some cash that you can use to invest.
Yeah, yeah, that's something to be admired, because a lot of folks, especially when you did your first flip, stepping in there. I don't know if you did a lot of the work yourself or if you hired contractors, but and if you're not used to doing that kind of thing, it's pretty involved. It can be pretty involved.
It's a lot harder than it sounds. It's not as complicated as some people make it, but it's hard work, and there's stress that comes along with it. And so that's why I say, you've got to ask yourself, do you have the patience and the fortitude to deal with all the problems yourself and get your hands dirty? Or would you rather, at this phase in life, pay a little more for the properties that have already been updated and let somebody else do the hard work and you just collect the checks?
Yeah, true. I mean, I can imagine your husband out there just trying his best to do it. But, if he hits his hand with a hammer, that's a occupational hazard. It's like, well, I can't adjust anybody this week.
Yes.
Right? So
I've told him many times, be careful, get off that roof. We'll call someone else for that part,
You got to insure his hands before he goes in there with a hammer.
Right.
Wow. Well, it's such a neat story. Well, it almost seems like you're even starting, almost starting anew here. What's sort of your business goal, as you look ahead? Where do you want to see this thing all go?
Bill, I'm still kind of asking myself that, and I'll tell you why. Because we have worked 70 to 80 hours a week for 12 years to get to the point where we would have financial freedom and be able to just enjoy our children from this point on until they're out of the house. And they are now 8, 10, 13, and 16. And so they're our number one. They're the reason that we did this to begin with. And so, while I thought I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, now they're all in school. And so, from 3:30 on when they're home, we just want to be, husband, wife, and parent. We just want to be fully focused on them and not just continue to work hard and grind just to grow a business. So we've already reached that level of financial freedom that allowed us to have this time with our kids. But we also realize that we're blessed, that I've got 5 or 6 hours a day that I can work while they're in school on something that I'm passionate about. And so now, as I'm growing larger multifamily investments and running those, what we make on those properties is really going toward, legacy building and time together, vacationing and being able to give back to some ministries that are really important to us. And the other thing that's really important to me as a kid that grew up in Section 8 housing is to really start to find ways that I can make a difference in those types of communities in the lives of young children and single moms, and to show them that there is hope, and through both the Lord and making wise financial decisions, they can get out of where they are. And so those things drive me to continue to work and to try to grow my multifamily business, but I'm not doing it just for more money. And so I don't have a number goal, Bill, like I have to buy this many doors by this date, or I have to make this much more money. God's provided what we need, and now everything else is extra and a way that we want to, use to bless our children and to bless others. And so I've basically said, however big my business buying and managing larger multifamily investments can grow, putting in time from the time my kids are in school until the time they're home, that's enough. And that's going to be how big it's going to grow. And I'm going to work hard during those hours, but at 3:30, unless there's an emergency, I'm shutting it down, and I'm just focused on my family.
Oh, sure. And like you said, there's the sports, and there's a lot of other things. And then you've got grandkids after that,
Sure. And it is, I've got 4 kids and they're all in sports. They're in the school plays and they play an instrument. And from 3:30 till about 9 or 9:30 every night, we are fully engaged in something with multiple kids a night. So it's really a full-time job, just in the evenings.
Oh, sure, sure. But what a blessing. I mean, just to be able to look ahead, and to know you have the funds, like, for, family vacations, you guys could do some fun stuff, or
Yes.
you guys can, do things that might have been a lot more difficult a few years back, but now, you can bless them in a way you couldn't before, which is pretty exciting too.
Exactly. Yeah, this summer was our first summer to really be able to take vacation, and we traveled for a little over a month this summer, thanks to buying, larger multifamily buildings and the acquisition fees that allowed us to do that. So it's just been a tremendous blessing to finally be able to kind of enjoy the fruits of our hard labor.
Oh, that's neat. That's so great. So great.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, our time's kind of zipping by here, but gosh, I could ask you a ton more questions. But I think you gave us a lot of food for thought and a lot of great information, practical information that people can use. And so we're kind of moved now into what we call our wrap it up, which is our sort of our lightning round, so to speak. Of I ask you about resources, and you share information of things that have been valuable to you that we can share with our audience that they might also want to explore too. So if you're ready, we can wrap it up. All right.
Great.
All right. Let's start with our first question. Favorite real estate book?
Multifamily Millions by Dave Lindahl.
I love
It
that.
is the book that really taught me about investing in multifamily and how to create a plan to create financial freedom through multifamily investing.
Yeah. Got it right on my desk here. I love
Awesome.
it. All right. Favorite just general business book?
I would say Life and Air. It's out of the box and probably not what you're thinking, but Life and Air is a story about creating the life that you desire and doing it today, and not just having to wait through grinding through life to make more money in hopes that you'll get there someday.
It's a great book. We've had the author on the show, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah, and a great book. I love that book.
Yes.
How about most valuable website that you use as part of your real estate success?
Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets
Yes.
has just an amazing tool belt full of real estate investing tools. No matter what niche you are in, there's just so much great information there. Not only articles and courses, but forums where you can ask questions and grow.
Yeah, and people. I mean, the contacts that I've made through. It's it's awesome, and especially if you're looking at new markets. You can start talking to people in those markets and make contact. Bigger Pockets, great choice.
Yes.
Favorite app? Anything on your phone that helps you out, or that you just you think is a valuable app to have?
It's going to sound pretty simplistic, but Google Calendar. I do not know what I did before Google Calendar. So it keeps us, so on point with trying to manage all the different things we need to for all our kids' sporting events and my real estate appointments and, time blocking. We've really started to time block so that we're most efficient with our day and have everything scheduled from, time to put dinner in the crock pot, to time to pick up the kids, to time to, be on a podcast or listen to a podcast, or asset management, anything that we need. We've got it right on our phone to be able to pop up and remind us to switch gears and to focus on all the things that we need to.
Neat. Maybe I've got I think that's something I can use here. I like
Yes.
that. How about favorite quote?
I don't remember who said it, but the first time I heard it, it really resonated with me. And that is to love people and use money and not the other way around. And it's really become, part of my life motto, to love God, love people, use money, and never, ever, ever give up.
I like that. That's really nice. And then this is sort of the trick question here. And if something happened, and let's not hope this never happens, of course. But if you lost absolutely everything, all your assets, and all you were left with is $1,000 in cash, what would you do with that $1,000 to rebuild your real estate business?
I would go out and target market sellers and find off-market multifamily deals, and then I would use the the money for the target marketing, writing letters, trying to find those deals, and then I would find partners to help me fund them and take them down.
I like it. Wow. Well, this is, Guy, this has been fantastic. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks that are listening here that would like to find out more about you and what you do. And I don't know if you would want to speak with anybody, but is there a way that people can find out about, what you do, your company, or maybe send you a question?
Sure. So I have a website, which is reimom.com, where you can learn more about coaching, consulting, and investing in large multifamily. And my email is info@reimom.com. And if you'd like, Bill, if your listeners are interested, I'd be happy to send anybody that sends me an email a free ebook copy of my most recent book, which is called Resilience: Turning Your Setback into a Comeback. It was a #1 Amazon bestseller, and it has a little bit more about my story and just encouraging stories to help other people that are struggling and looking for their next comeback.
Thank you for that. That is, I was blessed with a copy of that. And this is, when I talk about her story, she didn't have a chance to really go into a lot because of our limited time here. But this book will, well, you guys got to get it. And that's real nice. You can get it for free. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
That is so great. That is so great. Well, this is our close, and as you may know, we have a tradition here that our guests get to close us out with their best old hound dog howl. I mean, we're called the old dogs, right? So now you're not an old dog, but you can at least humor those of us that are, and give us your best old hound dog howl. Are you ready for that?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, let's go for it. All right. Good job.
Thank you.
Well, Anna, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. This is I'll tell you, inspiring for me, and also very instructive too. I've learned a lot. I think that those listening will as well, if they're really listening. I just want to thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. I'm really thankful to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. And I want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Now, please note, everything that Anna's talked about is going to be dissected and organized and put it into our show notes so that you can actually reference this on an ongoing basis if you'd like, and as well as all the links that were mentioned. They will be there. Everything's going to be in there, and that's at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. And so you're going to look for the episode with Anna Kelly. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.